Welcome back, guys, to Fish Scales and Shrimp Tails. So today I'm just going to go over the last tank that I put together for shrimp for the blue sapphires. And this was a tank that I put together just before I went away on vacation, sometime just around October. Very, very sparsely planted. This is one that gave me a lot of trouble with hair algae and all kinds of problems. The shrimp that I put in here really weren't of a great quality. This tank now, let's see, this was set up in October, so we're about 8-ish, 9-ish months in on this tank, roughly, since it was reset. And as you can clearly see, and I will zoom out here some so that we can get the full scope of things, we are heavily overgrown. Now, this is on purpose. So, let me back up a little bit while we talk about this tank. Coming back from vacation 7 or 8 months ago, I realized that by setting this tank up and then walking away from it for a week with the lights on, even though nobody was feeding it and there were no fish in here, I created a pretty big problem for myself. I spurred on a pretty serious hair algae problem. And then I found that the rocks that I put in here, because of the mineral content that these rocks have, it really attracted algae growth, string and hair algae growth from the rocks. So I've had to do a number of things here. I dropped the lighting levels in here by about 15 or 20% from the other tanks. And I just started jamming every cutting of every plant that I took out of other tanks in here that I could to absorb the extra nutrients in the water so that I could slowly try to get rid of the hair algae. As I've mentioned before, guys, I'm not one to use chemicals. I like a natural tank, and chemicals interfere with that ecosystem. They disrupt your microorganisms, and it's essentially like rebooting your tank. The tank was already getting to an established point. You know, it had those copepods and the microfauna in here that I wanted, and the last thing I want to do is put chemicals in here just to get rid of algae. So, by reducing the lighting levels, increasing the amount of plant matter in here, we've had some pretty good success. I've managed to get rid of a large quantity of that hair algae. There's still some over here in the corner on these rocks. There's a little bit of hair algae that's still growing in there. At some point, I'm going to have to get in there, pull those rocks out, and brush them off with a brush. I've got a little metallic or plastic brush that I'll brush them off with, get that hair algae out and reset them. That's the same thing I did on the other side. The other rock pile over here, I had the same issue with hair algae. And once we got the lighting levels reduced and more plant matter in here, and I noticed the hair algae is developing much more slowly, I just took the rocks out, scrubbed them down, and it's never come back. Now, all of my tanks that I'm going over today, and I don't know what order you're going to see them in, so again, I apologize if maybe I'm talking about things you haven't quite seen yet or in an order that doesn't quite make sense. I don't know when I'm going to get to post these, but you can see very clearly this tank, like all of my tanks right now, very, very much needs to be trimmed. And I've left it this way just so you could see where the tank was at before I've sort of done a maintenance session on it. I want you guys to know what tanks end up looking like. I want you to know what the pitfalls and problems are and the things that I've done as a solution. There's no point in me just showing you a beautiful tank and walking away, and that doesn't teach you anything. I have problems with my tank setups just like anybody else does, and this was one that I really messed up on. I put it together and then I kind of ignored it. I went away on vacation, I left the lights in there. I didn't have anywhere near enough plant material in here for the amount of nutrients that were in the water because of the dirt. I failed on every level. I didn't realize that my lighting levels were too high. Number of things. The other thing that I did, to my detriment on not so much this tank, but on the snowball tank, we'll get into it, is I introduced some fish here that didn't belong. Now, thankfully, in this tank, he didn't cause as many problems as they did in the snowball tank, and he was removed from this tank very quickly. Now, I will say there's a big difference in breeding on these shrimp. As I've said in previous videos, I realized what some of the problems were with my shrimp breeding and why I wasn't getting the numbers that I rather expected. And in large part of that is because I don't heat my tanks. So my tanks get pretty cold in the wintertime. All the way from fall through to spring, it's pretty cool down here. We're below 70 degrees. So shrimp breeding is not quite at a standstill, but doggone near. This tank, these are local shrimp that I got from a local breeder. Now, the quality was poor. There's no denying that. I've got several of them in here that need to be culled and put into another tank where they don't affect my breeding population, but I need the numbers in here first before I start looking for quality. What I will say, the difference between buying shrimp from a local breeder that are already breeding in this water type and these conditions and buying them from a store where they've come in from probably another country is dramatic. There are so many more blue shrimp in here than I have shrimp in my other tanks, and I started with a smaller population. They instantly started breeding when they went in here, and I've had a much higher survival rate in here than I have in any of my other tanks. And it's very hard for me to show you because, first of all, they're a very dark color, and the lighting level on this tank is still down dramatically because I'm still trying to deal with the remnants of what's left of the hair algae. Although I think after this maintenance session, I'm going to turn the lights back up. But it means that the shrimp blend in, and many of them are very, very small, but there's a much larger population in here than there was when I first started. And many of them, and I know you probably can't see it if I zoom in, I'm not sure, but there's one there, and I do believe, hard to tell, but I do believe that one is buried, and I think there's another one also elsewhere. They just breed so much better because they're already accustomed to these water conditions. They're already possibly accustomed to the temperatures. There are also 4 albinos in here. I have at least one albino in every single one of my tanks that I bred. That was not store-bought. And I've sort of shifted them around with the store-bought ones so that if they start to breed, I'm not getting weird genetic issues from breeding, mothers and daughters and fathers and daughters and sons and that sort of thing among fish. They're all healthy. They're all doing great. I don't know where the little one is in here. He tends to hide sometimes. It's kind of funny because you can tell the difference between the store-bought ones and the ones that you bred, because the ones that I bred, when I put food in this tank, they have learned as a Cory, they can go up to the top and grab the food, and the store-bought ones haven't figured that out for some reason. So it's really funny. At feeding time, you'll see one Cory from every tank up at the top eating and the other one's on the bottom. Again, this has been a great tank. It's been mostly maintenance-free. Like I said, I did have to reduce the lighting levels, and I did have to heavily plant this to try and get the algae under control, which I think I've done now, and I'm going to trim it down and replant it, but I'm going to start trying to maybe not even thin it out, just maybe scape it a little bit better so there's a little more open area. I think I'm going to take a lot of this out and maybe put a couple of crits in here. I'll leave this here until the crits start to take off because, again, I don't want the algae to come back. But again, this has been a great tank. It was kind of awful when I set it up. I admit it wasn't the greatest looking tank, but we're definitely starting to come into our own right now. We just need a little bit of maintenance, trim it back, clean things up, and it's going to look great. And the shrimp love it. Like I said, they're already breeding in here quite a bit. The albinos, I haven't seen any breeding in here, as with the Sunkist tank, but I'm not entirely sure that I have boys and girls in this tank or the Sunkist tank. I feel like they might all be of one sex or another. They're still a little bit young, so it's still a little harder for me to tell. I'll wait till they get a little bit bigger and I'll be able to figure out what's going on. But yeah, this has been a great tank. Like I said, they started breeding in here right away. So this has been very, very successful. I'll try to remember to do a quick update after I've done a maintenance session on all of these tanks, maybe a week or so later. But I just wanted you to see how things turned out. It did have some troubles. It still has some troubles. We still have hair algae in here. But we've, without chemicals, without mucking around and put my hands in here all the time, we've managed to start to get a grip on it. I think we're in a good place right now where if I replant these plants and the cuttings that I take and I wash off the last little bit of rocks that have hair algae on it, I think that might be the end of it, and we'll be in good shape from there. The plants will just continue to use up the nutrients, and I think we'll get a stop to that hair algae. So great little tank. I know it wasn't the prettiest thing when I set it up, and I know some people still have very strong opinions about this one. They don't like it. But again, it's not meant to be a super aesthetically pleasing tank. This is meant to be a breeding tank. It's meant to be a very natural tank, and it very much succeeds in that. The fish in here, as with all my dirted tanks, are super healthy. They have a very, like when you watch them, they're not stressed. They go about their day very naturally, very easy. There's no problems in here. There's no sickness. I've never had tanks set up for so long where I have no illness and no sickness of any kind ever at any point. It's crazy. It's so easy to take care of them this way. I don't do water changes. Haven't done that on this one either. Just, you know, top them up every now and then. Been a great little tank. It's not the prettiest thing to look at, but it's been a super stable, healthy tank. Just wanted to give you guys the update. I hope you enjoyed it. I will talk to you guys again in the next one.